Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. This is Paul from This Way to the Aquarium. In today's video, I want to talk about getting driftwood ready for putting in the aquarium. Now, driftwood such as this, which I bought online from Amazon.com, looks a great piece of wood, but I don't know where it came from. I don't know what kind of treatment it had in the past. So prior to putting it into a tank, whether there's fish in there right now or will soon be, it's always best to treat this in order to make sure that any tannins in it that I don't necessarily want in my tank are taken out of the wood, so it's less likely to tint the tank. Some of you probably know that with driftwood, once you pop it in the tank, if you haven't had any prior treatment to it, you're going to have the possibility of tannins leaching out of this wood. It's basically a color. It's going to tint your water. It will tint it a brown or yellowish color. So some people like that, some people want that. You might hear about dark water tanks. So whether you like that or not, treating your driftwood prior to putting it in the aquarium is still a great idea because you don't know where this wood has been. You don't know if there's any other harmful life on this wood that's going to cause problems for your tank or cause problems for the inhabitants of your tank. So there are a couple different ways to treat driftwood. Basically, the quickest way and easiest way is people will just hose it off, take it outside with a garden hose, high pressure, as much pressure as their hose will permit, wash it off, make sure there's no debris on it, and then just pop it in the tank. While a garden hose with a nozzle attachment can shoot out a jet like spray, helps clean off the surface of the driftwood, it doesn't necessarily take off everything. So some better options might include getting a firm bristle brush and just scrubbing it off, taking off any debris that you can see there. You could try using a wire bristle brush, but you run the risk of damaging the wood, as the wire could be a little harsh on that. You might start scraping away pieces and chunks of the wood. So preference is not to do that unless there's some bad parts on that wood, but you might be better off just cutting that. If it looks pretty bad, just take that off, cut it off. Use a saw, use a hand tool to remove the bad pieces. In my opinion, that's a little more risky because you never know what's living inside the wood. If there's any insects in there or any other types of viruses or germs in there that once put in the tank, it's going to affect your fish, it's going to affect the other plant life in there, and it can cause all sorts of havoc. So this particular piece of wood came in a 2-pack. I purchased it from Amazon. So it basically came with a set of instructions that said you should boil this wood and basically boil it for 3 hours, 1 hour each time. After 1 hour of boiling, drain the water, put in fresh clean water, and boil it again for a total of 3 times. So the directions I got for this driftwood, they note that boiling the wood can help get rid of tannins as well as help waterlog the wood so it doesn't float. Unfortunately, that was not the case, as you can see from this clip right here. So the uppermost piece floats over there and that lower piece does not float. So at least worked for one piece, but the other piece is still floating, so I'm going to need to do something additional with that to make sure it stays down. I think the instructions that came with this wood were trying to go overboard with it. I've seen in other cases, in other videos and online, some people say just boiling this for 15 minutes and you're good to go. I went a little more than 15 minutes. I did 2 hours total boiling time, and then I did do soaking time as well too to help leach out some of the tannins. That way there's fewer tannins in my tank once it's been put in place into the final tank. And any other family members, they might not be too keen on you boiling aquarium driftwood in a pot that is used for household cooking purposes. That's something you can discuss amongst each other. In my case, what I ended up doing is I found a used stock pot from Facebook Marketplace. Basically, it was $20, holds about 5-6 gallons of water. And with that stock pot, I was able to pop in all these 3 different pieces of wood here. Now, while some of it did stick up a little bit, that was fine. I just ended up rotating it for the next cycle. So every piece pretty much got covered in boiling water. It leached out a lot of tannins, as you can see from the videos and photo over here. So once it's done, I did soak it as well too for a couple additional days. And basically I would just put hot water from my tap and left it in there for overnight just to help leach out further tannins. And tannins were certainly still leaching out of the wood even after a couple of boilings. Other methods I've heard is you could soak this in bleach, basically create a diluted bleach solution, water and bleach, soak this in bleach. That'll help kill off any germs and bacteria. I'm not too certain if I'm sold on that. Because wood is porous, that bleach will soak into the wood, it will remain in the wood, and there's always that risk that it'll stay in there, and that once you pop it in your tank, that bleach will then escape, get released into your tank, whether all at once or slowly over time. It still will cause a lot of havoc to your tank and can kill the fish in your tank. So I don't recommend bleaching this. My preference would be to boil it. Instead of bleaching it, you can pour hydrogen peroxide on it, and so that's what I did for another piece. So hydrogen peroxide does have very effective capabilities for disrupting bacteria, disrupting viruses, disrupting funguses. You just need to make sure it stays in contact enough with the wood. Now, unfortunately with wood, since it's porous, some of that stuff can get inside the pores, inside the wood. So whatever you're spraying on the surface will take care of stuff on the surface, but you still might run the risk of having something that's still in the wood that could find its way out in time and cause issues with your tank. Another thing to note with hydrogen peroxide is that it is light sensitive. So over time, whether it be sunlight or some sort of other light, indoor light, it can affect the hydrogen peroxide and break it down. So basically it becomes useless. The nice thing about hydrogen peroxide is when it breaks down, it turns into water and oxygen, which in your fish tank's case is pretty harmless. So another option for treating your wood, basically sanitizing it so you don't have any germs in there, you're killing off any bacteria, killing off any potential algae or anything else bad in there, is to put it in the oven. So let's say it's a large piece, it doesn't necessarily fit in the pots that you have for boiling. You can put it in the oven, bake it at a lower temperature, nothing higher than say around 200, 220 degrees. Too hot, you run the risk of burning it. And at the same time too, you need to be careful because some of that wood could have sealed air pockets in there, especially if it's been washed in the past and it absorbs some water. So there could be water in there that once it heats up, builds up in there, you might have a pressure buildup. You could hear it popping and cracking. Last thing you want to do is damage your oven. So just make sure that when you're doing that, make sure it's been thoroughly dried before you stick it in the oven and let it bake at a low temperature. Too high of a temperature, you're gonna run the risk of burning it. The lower you are, you'll just have to bake it a little longer in order to make sure all the bacteria and any other germs or bad stuff in there are sanitized. So bake it for a couple hours, that way you're sure that, okay, you're taking care of the stuff that's in there and it's not gonna harm your fish or harm your tank. So one of the main benefits for boiling it and soaking it in water is to get rid of the tannins. Like I mentioned before, some people do like those tannins in their tank, and especially if you're going for a dark water tank, having those tannins in the tank is not a big deal. Now in my case, I don't want tannins in this current tank that this driftwood is going to be going in. I'm still expecting to see some tannins in there because even though I boiled that driftwood for a couple hours, soaked it for a couple days, there's still tannins coming off it, so I expect to see some there. So in a future video, I'm going to explore different methods of getting those tannins out of your tank, basically getting rid of that dark water color out of your tank. So that way it looks more crystal clear versus the tinted tank, which in my case I don't want. So that's all I have for this video. Hope you found it helpful. If you did find it helpful, please hit that like button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.